Hello and welcome again to a Very English Craft Room and another video in the scrapbooking series. This time I'm scrapbooking some photographs of the shoes and handbag I had for my daughter's wedding as part of the Scrap Squad's 12 Days of Spring Scrap Lift. So I started by pulling together the craft paper and some bits of paper that I thought would go well with the photographs there of the shoes. So the shoes were navy and peach and sort of like a baby blue, so trying to pull together the items for that and some embellishments that I thought would go well with it as well. I found out I didn't really have much in the way that was peach. I had some that were sort of peachy orange and some that were pinks and sort of pale blues and navy blue, so had to kind of make do with what I had there. So I'm going to use the title from these words here that says capture, and I will end up using a little card that says love at first sight that came from a wedding kit that I've got put away for doing some of the other photographs from my daughter's wedding. I like this piece of paper for the main background because it had got most of the colours in that were in the shoes and also looked really good with the craft paper background there. Although I do end up putting a little border around it of the blue as well. So just distressing the edge with the distress tool just to give a little bit of definition to the bottom edge there. So here you can see I found some paper that is blue and white spots on a pale blue background. So I'm cutting that and I will trim that original backing paper with the flowers on there down slightly so that it shows a little border of this. So again, just distressing the edges. This little distressing tool has got lots of little nicks in it, and in each nick is a different blade. The blade sits at different depths, should I say, within it, and it's quite useful then for distressing the edges. So because I'm not sticking this one with the flowers directly at the top of the page now, I distressed the top and the bottom of it, whereas originally I had just distressed the bottom. So now using some double-sided tape just to attach the two layers together, and I will find and use my little dental tool to smooth it all out first and then to remove the backing tape. So just lining this up so I've got a relatively equal amount top and bottom and that it sits quite square. I'm just using the spots on the paper to line it up rather than using my T-square, and you can see there's a very thin border down each side. That is the other side of the spotty paper, and I suppose if I did a page that was more tropical or even Lanzarote cactus gardens, that would be quite good for that, and I do have some more of that left if indeed I decide to scrap that. So when sticking those down I decided to leave a little bit of the craft showing at the top as well. And now I'm trying to decide which way up I want these photos. Now one was taken landscape and one was taken portrait, so that was why I was having some difficulty. So while I was trying to decide that, I thought I will actually map them onto this navy cardstock, and then hopefully I will be able to make my mind up once I've done that. So again, sticking them down and using the ruler just to tear across the paper to give a rough edge. It just gives another little dimension to it all. So I'm using the lines on the ruler to actually make sure I get a relatively sort of even tear in terms of thickness. And now I'm using some Tim Holtz Distress ink in Antique Photos just to colour the edges where it's torn white, because I just wanted to match it into the background paper there, the craft sort of look there. So these shoes, I think I've worn them a couple of times after her wedding, but not very often. They are lovely shoes, but They're not the sort of shoes that are comfortable to wear for a very long period of time. So now I'm having a look at how I can lay them out, and also I'd like to use some of this paper here that I actually used for a layout with her wedding dress, so hopefully it will match in quite nicely in the album. So again, just tearing, not cutting anything too precisely in this layout. So I'm going to build up a little cluster here with the photographs and layers of paper and embellishments, and I'll probably do most of that before sticking it down. Now I've just laid that down quite low on the page, and actually I really quite like that, looking at that where that is. However, that's not where it'll end up, because on the original scrap lift it was higher up, and that's where I end up putting it in this layout. So I'm obviously looking for something at this time. I was actually looking through the box of wedding papers and embellishments for this little page of cut aparts. So I'm now going to trim out that one that says "It was love at first sight," because with those shoes it definitely was, and if you are a lover of shoes and handbags, you'll appreciate that sentiment. So using my trimmer just to separate the different strips, and then I will cut it out from that final strip there. Just typical really, it was right in the middle of the page, but that's just how these things happen. So there was a little thin strip of white left on the top, so I just trimmed that off as well. So now I'm going to rearrange these photographs and this little cut apart, and I will decide how I'm going to put it. So at that point I thought, oh, maybe I could turn the layout on its side and do it portrait rather than landscape, but then I changed my mind and put it back to how it was originally. So I was playing with it there and thought, no, I don't like the way it looks with the handbag on its side completely there, so sort of having a bit of a play. So I think I've nearly got it where I want it, but then I think actually I need to be able to read it all, so I'm going to pop it on the top of the shoe photograph there. So now that I'm happy, I'm going to stick it down with some tape, just little bits, because I may want to stick some things underneath it. And as typical, you never quite get it back how you had it. And the tape that I put on that cut apart wasn't actually anywhere near where it needed to be, so I just need to be careful now, because it has got some sticky on the back of it that might stick to the layers before I'm actually ready to actually finally stick it down. So I've got this sort of see-through parchmenty type paper. Once again, I've forgotten exactly what that's called, that I'm going to pop as a layer behind it eventually. And in the original it had a tag tucked underneath those layers, so I was cutting a tag in colours that reflected it. However, it doesn't actually end up there in the final layout. I end up cutting that down even further to make a couple of other little embellishment clusters. The reason I didn't leave it there is it was starting to become quite a wide cluster and would have covered almost all of the backing, and I wanted some of those flowers and butterflies and things to show through. On the original it had the tag sort of drop down like that, but it just, in this instance in my layout, just looks slightly out of place, so I decided I wasn't going to use it there. So I wanted to get some ribbons that like they were on my shoes, so I went to my ribbon box and got some ribbon out, and I also got some lace out that I thought would go quite nicely. Although this lace was very, very wide, so I ended up cutting it down and using various parts of it stuck underneath. I just wanted to give a little bit more of a vintagey feel with having that background there with the butterflies and the flowers looking quite vintagey, and the craft paper itself looking quite aged. So you can see how there I'm just trimming it down using my fussy cutting scissors, Well, maybe not, I'm not quite sure what scissors I used there. There might have just been a little pair that I've had for a while. So trying to decide which part I want to stick underneath there and end up with the more fancy piece, and the other part does get used. So just cutting it down a little bit so it fits behind there. So I'm going to pop some tape underneath, just a couple of little bits, just to anchor the lace down. Originally I thought I was going to put a long strip along it and then try and tuck it underneath, but I thought it's just going to catch and just end up looking wonky. So it's the end of a long work week for me. Been vaccinating again. But today I've been working from home, doing some of my proper job and doing some admin for that. And shortly I'm going to pack up and go to the leisure centre for a swim, because they've recently reopened the leisure centres for swim and gym and some other bits and pieces here in the UK. So I'm trying to take advantage of having the opportunity to do so. And then a little later on we are going to go and view a house with the view that we might purchase it. We are looking for somewhere to move to, so it's proving to be a little bit of a stressful situation, because as soon as something comes up on the market it's selling within hours. And when you're working full time it's really difficult to be able to get a viewing, and if we even do get a viewing, by the time we get there it's sold. So it's been quite a difficult time for us, which is typical when everything this end we're ready to go, and could move within a month really. So again, using the ruler here just to tear that paper. It's got little flowers on it, so again sort of reflects the theme of the fabric on the shoes and the background there. And you don't end up seeing much of it, but it just gives a little hint and gives another little dimension. So like I said, I'm building up that cluster before actually sticking it down. So yet another layer of papers that's got the right colour flowers in it, and I do end up using a bit of that behind here as well. It's quite nice sometimes working from home, because at least it means I can do things like put the washing out when it's nice out there, for it to dry, which I have done today, although I've just brought it in because it's starting to look a little bit overcast. So again, playing with that blue paper with the gold on, it was like I was determined to get it in there, but you can see it's actually starting to get too long for the background. So ripping that off and seeing whether putting some of this on here will look good. So I think I do end up with a little bit of it there, just a little bit showing, not much, just so then it will link in with the bits I use further down. I did want to put some darker blue in because the shoes were darker blue and the matting on the photographs were darker blue. So I decided not to put it exactly straight, just have it sort of at a little angle. And I thought I could put some that side, but you know, sometimes you're just desperate to use something and you just can't get it to look right, and sometimes you just have to give up with it, and that was just one of those cases. So re-sticking that layer back down. So you can see it's building up to be quite a big cluster, and almost covers the whole of that backing paper, so I really didn't want to put any more there. So I was experimenting with putting the word capture on there, and indeed I'd actually do put it partially on there when we get to that final bit there. So I've obviously gone off again to look for something, and I suspect it's different layers and some more, it could be the other alphas that I was going to use. So finally decided where I'm putting that cluster there, just adding a few bits of it. Wow, that was a little wooden embellishment that said love. The original design had a wooden embellishment on it, so I wanted to put one on there and it just seemed perfect. So using some foam tape so that the whole of this cluster sits a little proud from the background and adds a little dimension. It's quite nice when it just gives a little bit of shadow. So now I'm going to have a look at what other embellishments I might want on there. So I'm just getting a few brads out because the original scrap lift photograph example had some brads. I usually use, or I used to use, loads and loads and loads of brads in my layouts, but I haven't used so many recently, so it was quite nice to get some out and actually start using them again. So I'm going to use that word capture, and I wanted to use some of that gold that was there underneath and these gold alphas. So I put capture this, and I'm going to use some of the love hearts from those puffy stickers in a minute. So that tag that I carefully made, I'm now cutting apart to be the background for a cluster here on the left and another that will go lower down on the right. So backing it with some of that lace that I had. And some of the paper that I'd used earlier. So just roughly hand tore that to go underneath, and again more examples of the paper that I'd used previously, but I think I decided at that point enough's enough on that little cluster. So I put the word capture sort of on the very, very top of it, and the word this sort of nestled underneath it, and I will put a little love heart on there too. So when it's finally there, the word capture actually sits above the lace and the spotty paper there. So now making the little cluster that's going to go on the bottom right hand side. So again, another little strip of that blue. I think it's something that I've used in other layouts, and this was like the final little bit of it. So again, a bit of the lace trimmed down, stick it behind it. And on there, I think I put one of the little puffy hearts and some of the brads. So I've got some of the coloured flowers out. I did get quite a lot of card cut out, die cut embellishments out, but actually don't end up using many, if any, of those. I think I stick mainly with the little paper flowers. And I found a couple of little buttons that had pale blue and white polka dots on, so that went quite well with the background paper there. So just having a little sort through my blue embellishment box, and I think that's where I find the buttons and things, and some more of the blue flowers. So like I've said before, I sort my embellishments out into tubs of colours. So this is a stack of 3 tubs, one on top of the other, and there's only 2 there because I've taken the top layer off to get to the blue. So I decided to use a bit of that paper with the flowers in the end, and again roughly tear it around just so it's a small amount, and put yet more laciness underneath it. So although it's quite a small little cluster of embellishments, it actually has quite a number of layers into it. So using the wet glue to stick down the flowers, getting to the end of that bottle, so actually it's quite difficult to get some of it out. I do when I remember store it upside down, but I have to remember to leave the lid on properly when I do that. I apologise for the shadow on the video. I'd had the curtains open and the sun was coming in through the back window there, but it was going down, so it was a bit shadowy really. However, it just seems a real pity when the sun is shining to actually shut it out. So using the puffy stickers and sticking down the buttons as well, and the rest of the flowers. I think there was a tendency for me to want to put too many embellishments on here, but actually I had to hold back a bit because it's quite busy layout without too much else. So using my dental tool to put the holes in for the brads. I also use it once I've got the brads through, sometimes to open up the slip pin part of the brad. So now it's just a case of deciding which brads I want to use and where I want to use them, and then poking the holes and sticking them through. So now just adding a little bit of journaling just to explain what the layout is about. I could have popped it on a tag behind and had it as hidden journaling, which in some ways might have looked a bit nicer, but hindsight sometimes is a wonderful thing. So the layout is now nearly finished, so I'd like to thank you for joining me in this video, and if you've enjoyed this video, I would ask if you could please click on the like and subscribe buttons, and maybe leave me a comment about what sort of videos of scrapbooking you might like to see, and whether there's any other crafts that you think you might like videos of. So thank you once again for joining me from a very English craft room.